Just about every shred of evidence we have from the early church fathers identifies John, the son of Zebedee, as the author of John's Gospel. But if you read the book by itself, John isn't explicitly identified by name. He refers to himself as the beloved disciple. Because of that, skeptics like Bart Ehrman tell us that we're clueless about who wrote it. Ehrman says the Gospel of John is completely anonymous. The author does not tell us his name or identify himself in any way. But before Bart was a twinkle in his daddy's eye, 19th century New Testament scholar B.F. Westcott did some Batman-like detective work. Using only internal evidence, Westcott narrowed things down to John, the son of Zebedee, as the prime suspect for who wrote the Gospel. I'm going to hit some of the highlights that Westcott uncovered, but if you want the full treatment with all of the scriptural references, you can download his book for free from the Google Play Store. I'll go ahead and link it in the description down below. First off, Westcott starts very broad. He shows us that the author was Jewish. This point is rarely disputed, but there are some who will say that John was some Greek guy writing on the fly in Ephesus. But John makes tons of references to the Jewish scriptures and Jewish beliefs. He makes unexplained references to the prophet that will come. He speaks of the hostility between the Jews and Samaritans. There's the mention of the Sabbath requirement being annulled by the law of circumcision. There's the passing comment about the belief that the Messiah will live forever, and the author alludes to or uses the Old Testament over 20 times. In some instances, John's quotes are closer to the Hebrew or Aramaic than the Greek Septuagint. Now, there's also the fact that John was from Palestine. This point isn't too controversial, but it does bear some examination. So we see in John 2, there's a trip from Cana to Capernaum that's described as going down. Now, the elevation of Cana is over 700 feet above sea level. Capernaum is nearly 700 feet below sea level. And in John 5:1, it reads that Jesus went up to Cana to Jerusalem. Jerusalem has an elevation of 2,575 feet, so John knows the terrain. Bethany near Jordan is described with spot-on precision as being 15 stadia away from the city. In John 5, the author mentions the Pool of Bethesda, which was surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. Well, in the 1950s, archaeologists discovered the remains of the pool. The pool was located by the Sheep Gate, and what do you know, it was enclosed by 5 roof colonnades. The author also mentions that Jesus walked in the colonnade of Solomon during the winter. The roof walkway would have protected Jesus from the cold winds. John also mentions 5 different bodies of water, more than any other gospel writer. We know that John was a fisherman, so this actually makes a lot of sense. He's also the only gospel writer to refer to the Sea of Galilee as the Sea of Tiberias. In 20 BC, Herod actually finished building the town of Tiberias on the southwest shore of the lake, and after this, the name Sea of Tiberias started to be used for the lake itself. So, over and over, John shows that he's a local. This isn't an easy thing to pull off without the help of Wikipedia or Google. Using ancient sources like Strabo, Josephus, or Philo wouldn't have given him this kind of knowledge. Also remember that Jerusalem was decimated during the Jewish War around 70 AD, so he would have had to have been a local person writing this before the war. And when you contrast John with later apocryphal gospels, there's no comparison with the kind of geographical knowledge that John had. Now it's time to narrow things down much further. When we look inside of John, we see that he's not just a Jew with local knowledge, he's also an eyewitness. John knows details about specific people for no apparent reason. He's the only writer to mention Nicodemus or Lazarus or Judas's father Simon or Malchus. John mentions very oddly specific numbers, like there were 6 water pots when Jesus turned the water into wine. The people told Jesus that it took the temple 46 years to be built. The Samaritan woman had 5 previous husbands. The paralytic was sick for 38 years. The apostles rode for 25 to 30 stadia before they saw Jesus walking on the water. Lazarus was dead for 4 days. Mary's perfume was worth 300 denarii. The disciples caught 153 fish. And there's other little details that are brought out. Like when Jesus fed the 5,000, the loaves that were used were barley loaves. The branches in the triumphal entry were palm branches. When Jesus warmed himself by the fire, we're told in John's gospel that it was a charcoal fire. We read that Jesus' tunic was seamless, woven from top to bottom. There's also specific times that are mentioned. For example, Jesus came to Bethany 6 days before the Passover. And there's mentions of the 10th hour, the 6th hour, the 7th hour. It was night. It was early morning, it was evening, it was by night. All of these mentions of specific times are just so unlikely to be the product of oral tradition alone. Finally, looking further at internal clues, we find the author was one of the 12 disciples. He's familiar with scenes where only the disciples were present. For example, he knows about their calling, their trip to Samaria. He knows that there's a lot of grass where Jesus fed the 5,000. He knows about all of Jesus's visits to Jerusalem. He knows about the disciples' reactions and even their thoughts and their feelings. The author knows both what they said to Jesus and what they said among themselves, and even their misunderstandings. He even knows where Jesus would go to avoid people. All these vivid details bear the marks of somebody who was actually there. We've looked at a lot of details. The writer says that he's an eyewitness, and he certainly comes across as one with all of these little particulars. Now it's time to line up our suspects. With the help of New Testament scholar Craig Blomberg, let's see if we can narrow it down even further. Here's what Blomberg has to say. In John 21:24, the disciple is linked directly to the witness of this gospel, perhaps by his followers who are putting their imprimatur or stamp of approval of it. He obviously is one of those present at the Last Supper, though a few more than the 12 might have been there, but he also joins Mary, the mother of Jesus, at Jesus' crucifixion. He runs with Peter to see the empty tomb, and he's among the 7 who return to Galilee and encounter the risen Lord there. Why would Jesus entrust his aging mother to a disciple and not a family member? Joseph may well have been dead by this time, and Jesus' half-brothers may not have believed in him, but it would have had to have been somebody who was extremely close to him. Someone outside the 12 would appear to be an unlikely candidate. In the Synoptic Gospels, Peter, James, and John seem to form an inner core of leadership among the 12, while in Acts, John accompanies Peter as his close companion. We know the sons of Zebedee are present in John 21:2, though they are never mentioned by name in this gospel. The author can't be Peter, since the beloved disciple is distinguished from him, and he can't be James, because James was martyred by Herod Agrippa in AD 44, long before this gospel was even written. That leaves John as the only plausible person. So, by the process of elimination, we have zeroed in and found that John, the son of Zebedee, is the person who wrote the Gospel of John. The early church fathers got it right. The Christian can't be called naive for accepting the traditional authorship of John's Gospel.